Hello everybody and welcome back to another Star Wars Legion report card video. Today we're going to be talking about the Republic and their support card options. Before I get started today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the new points drop at the end of the video just to address it at the very least. Super exciting stuff. I think they made a lot of great changes. I think the game is in a little bit better of a spot now after those changes for sure, but we'll talk about it a little bit. But I do want to let these points kind of marinate, if you will, for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and then I can give you guys some appropriate re-updated report cards on everything that got changed. Like the Fluttercraft's going to be in this video. I may come back in 2 weeks and be like, hey, I was wrong. Now with the new points, we'll probably do this. But upcoming, like when the ISP comes into our heavy report card video, I will address it as, of course, its new points update, just like we will be addressing the Fluttercraft today as its new points update. With all this being said, we're going to talk about the generic supports, but I will address that at the end. Super exciting stuff, and then I will absolutely make a video once we're all wrapped up with this to address all of that stuff, and then we'll move on to things like battle forces, start talking about Bright Tree, and then I'll definitely make a video for all of that, actually, addressing all of the new units that have come out, like Ahsoka, Cody, and all that good stuff. But super exciting times. I'm very happy to go back and give people like Rex maybe a little bit more love on their report cards and talk about what they have to offer. But nonetheless, let's get started with the supports for the Republic faction. First up, we have the Republic ATRT. Coming in at 60 points, it has Armor, Climbing Vehicle, Expert Climber, and Scout 1. It is one model with 6 health, breaking at 4 wounds, and it surges to hit and defend. Comes with a nice 3 red in melee with Impact 1, and then a black, white, white, critical 1, Impact 1 rocket, just sitting on top. I give it a D+. I actually really like the Republic ATRT, and I've played with them a lot, but unfortunately, when we're talking about them in a competitive aspect, I don't think they quite cut it. I think they start getting too expensive when you start strapping guns on them, and we'll talk more about what they're trying to do versus how it actually works out. The pros is these things are absolutely a fire support platform. They can just kind of sit in the middle of nowhere and just aim, shoot, and then fire support big old clone shots into them, which is very nice because armor really does give them a decent amount of defense without actually having any. Scout's cool too. There's nothing wrong with getting a free speed 1 move to get them in that fire support position as soon as possible. They also have some different weapon options, so you can kind of versify their role as you're looking to play whatever type of list. Cons, I think there's just straight up better fire support options. That's just something that Gar has, is so many different dice combos and different things you can do, like Anakin Saber Throw, fire support's really amazing. Unfortunately, we'll start talking about the heavies here in a second and why they don't quite add up to that, especially when we're talking about a 70-point unit. I think they're pretty useless without fire support, and that's not a good feeling, as most of the other things in the game that clones are fire supporting into, for instance, maybe like Echo, can still be really good without fire supporting into them. ATRT, on the other hand, can really find itself struggling to do a whole lot of anything when that is the case. So heavy cover is going to affect these heavy weapons, and we'll just go ahead and look at them. First up, the flamethrower. This is a fine upgrade. I mean, 2 black dice for every unit in spray, but I just don't really like the idea of the flamethrower ATRT combo. It's definitely interesting with armor, and Scout 1 is going to help them move up the board quicker, but there's just so many better units that can do big dice pools like that don't require you to get into range 1 of stuff. I can imagine if my opponent had a Force User or just Impact in general and was just shooting me as I was trying to crawl my way up into range 1 of something to maybe get one big shot off. And this also sucks with flamethrowers, in my opinion, is that maybe I need to kill a 2-man unit or something like that, or maybe I'm having a good game. That means my targets are most likely the most healthy units on my opponent's side, meaning that the flamethrower is arguably one of the worst weapons in the game to waste on finishing off an activation, which obviously isn't the point of it, but 15 points for that is just not cutting it for me. The AT-RT laser cannon is the one I played around with the most because I love impact and I hate playing against armor. Plus, it's range 4, so these things can sit back at an even safer distance. Kind of feels like a counter to armor. I still think this one's pretty good, but when vehicles have cover now even, it's just, once again, I come back to that conversation of cover can really affect these weapons. Obviously, the flamethrower doesn't care, but ATRT aim shoot something like a bus, and if your opponent says he has heavy cover and you guys agreed that, so-and-so is cover, you're getting 1 dice through, and that feels really bad. And that's definitely the case when you're shooting something that isn't a vehicle. If you're shooting trooper units and you don't have a fire support available, for instance, maybe like on a 1-pip, and you don't have 5s or something like that to get more orders up, it's just very useless. It's just going to be 1 dice, maybe, if you get all 3 hits past cover. So, still though, when you're fire supporting into this, it can be very helpful. It's a very nice dice pool since it does surge to hit, but at the same time, for 10 points, it's an interesting thought. It just never really seems to be quite worth it when I put them on the table. ATRT Rotary Blaster is just 5 black dice. It's a nice little dice pool. I won't say anything against it. It's just kind of the same problem. You're probably getting maybe 3-4 hits and then heavy cover, so 2 after cover for a 70-point unit. It's just not really that great. Now, of course, if you're fire supporting into this one, that can be pretty fun, but it's also the most expensive one, so you kind of have to weigh your options. I just straight up think there's better fire support options for the clone faction that don't require you to pay as many points to get what the ATRT can bring you. However, I will say these are one of my favorite aesthetically pleasing units on the table. I love to just put them down with my clone ball, just because I think it looks so cool and thematic. However, I just don't think they're that great, and unfortunately they were not touched with this errata, so I think they sit at a solid D+. One other reason that they're kind of in that spot is because Barks just simply exist at 55 points. I give them an A-, and I have plenty of reasons to tell you why. First up, Arsenal 2. This doesn't really matter as much, it just kind of lets you use any heavy weapons that they bring, and of course that extra black dice if you were bringing them naked. Cover 1 is perfectly fine. Speeder, absolutely. It's a single model with 5 health, red defense dice breaking at 3. They do surge to hit, not defend. They are speed 3 until you put a upgrade / sidecar on them. They have 2 weapon options, the 1 black dice at range 3, and then the fixed front rainbow at 1 to 3. These things are cheap, and I have to agree that they are probably one of the best fire support options because they are also a speeder, giving you maybe some out of cover shots, a lot of aim and shoots though for sure, and most importantly when we're talking clones and Republic, a somewhat stagnant faction that wants to stick together and make sure you're sharing tokens and everything's close to one another, so you can use exemplar or generic clone sharing, whatever it is. You're sometimes taking a lot of actions to get more tokens to share, or better yet, you're just moving to stay together. Barks can kind of break that thematicness, or rather style of clone play, and really just be the speeders they need to be. And it allows them to play those unfavorable objectives like bombing run and breakthrough, and heck, I think they're pretty great at key positions too, because they can compulse and knock stuff off there. They search to hit as well, which is very nice for fire support options. Upgrades are fine, but in my opinion, completely unnecessary. Cons, they can break. It happens quite a lot too, because people are going to shoot your barks, but speeders are kind of one of the last things you want to worry about breaking, so it's not the end of the world, and these things very rarely don't like it. It's more the 2-action one that can affect you the most, but even then, it's not that bad. No clone sharing, so unless you have exemplar, these things are not going to be sharing with your generic clones, which is fine because they're usually going to be out and about anyways. Cover can also sometimes hurt their offense. There will be quite a few times where you are just shooting those 4 dice at an opponent, and heavy cover can knock 2 of those off easily, and with that white dice in there, you're maybe getting 1 past cover, but like I said, they're more of a fire support platform than a straight up killing machine. They're not really the Empire speeder bikes, but they are definitely their own beast in themselves. And they could probably be considered an A+ by many, but I do think that they kind of stray away from the clone Republic ideology of everything sticking together and using stuff like that. And we see a lot of clone lists being a lot more Anakin Padme, let's ball up and keep everyone together and share as many tokens as possible and be super elite. And the Barks, usually go with like Yoda and kind of do the opposite, where they're like, okay, well, Yoda can share tokens with us, but we don't really care. We're just going to play the objective super hard. So 2 drastically different styles of play, but I think they're a really cool unit that fits into the faction well and gives some much needed cheap activations to the Gar faction. Up next, we have their heavy weapons, or sidecars if you will. You get the Ion Gunner coming in at 24 points. Once again, these all reduce your maximum speed by 1. It is inexhaustible at range 1 to 3 for 3 black, 1 white, fixed front or rear. Impact 1 and Ion 1 is just kind of an overly expensive upgrade, especially since it exhausts, so I just kind of hate this one. I don't like to use the word hate, but I have literally never considered putting this on a bark. On the other hand, the bark RPS is a little more reasonable, kind of doing the same thing in my opinion, but no ion, just an extra impact with a black, red, and a white at range 2 to 4. You can shoot this anywhere, by the way. This is not a fixed front or rear, so that's very nice. Gives you the keyword that clones are kind of looking for a lot of times, which is impact. Can really help them out in terms of generics, but at the same time, does make your bark 21 more points expensive. Twin laser gunner is the cheapest option, just throwing 2 more black and 2 more white at fixed front and rear. Just can make those fire support dice pulls really big and scary once you start getting too many clones at range 3 of you. Next up, we have the Fluttercraft, starting in at 55 points. It's got cover 2. It is immune to blast, melee, and range 1 weapons because it is up in the air. It's got reposition and speeder 2. It's one model. It's 6 health, breaks at 3, white defense dice, surge to defend, and to hit. It is speed 2 with a black and a white for its little pistol. Fluttercraft is super hard for me to talk about because I just genuinely do not see them. I have one sitting at my feet right now that I still have to put together. And let's just go ahead and talk about it because I have seen them and I have not seen a ton of success, unfortunately. I give them a D+. We did just see a 10-point drop, I believe, in the one heavy weapon upgrade, so these things may have some cheeky lists that come out that people start using and start finding a lot of success with, but I think there's some glaring issues that prevent it from being successful nonetheless. Once again, another fire support platform for the most part. Sure, this one you can play objectives, not shoot things, whatever you gotta do. Cool, great, grand, wonderful, but at the end of the day, it does feel like another fire support platform for clones to shoot into. Speeder's always nice. Once again, super fast unit that's gonna have a big base as well to get across the board, and of course the repulsor vehicle and the fact it flies is gonna keep it pretty safe about getting stuck behind anything. Surging to hit and defend is great. The cheaper heavy is super awesome. I think that is actually a really good upgrade and could bump this letter grade up to maybe like a C or a C plus if you're using that specifically. But once again, I have not really seen it enough to give you a god honest opinion on that, so I do kind of keep it down here. Cons wise, I do know what's wrong with it. Super hard to use, right? I have seen so many people try to fly these things, and it's just a very finicky unit to make sure that, oh, okay, I move here, then I reposition, okay, now you're in my rear arc, and now I'm going to shoot you. Same thing with the bomber. It's like, okay, how does overrun work? Oh, I landed on you, but I can't hit this unit because it's not the same movement. Oh, I hit that building, so I take a wound. Like, it's really hard to use from what I've seen. I've played it once, and it was, once again, hard to use, but that's no excuse, because once you get good at something, you can make them a little bit better, right? So I think the same thing kind of applies here, is that the more you play with it, the more you can probably do some cool stuff with it. The biggest thing for me is that this thing is not hiding anywhere. You're going to find so few maps that are able to cover up this vehicle and protect it from getting shot. And unfortunately, with cover 2 and 6 health, yes, it's a single wound model, that's great, but on white defense dice and surging to hit, and the fact that one of its upgrades requires you to quite literally drive over people, and then the other upgrade requires you to get up close and personal, it's going to be one of the first units to get shut off the board, and there's going to be a lot of lists that are able to deal with these things effectively and fast. So I just think it will die for the most part. I've never seen a Fluttercraft make it to round 6, if that's any consolidation. And you also need upgrades, so it's not 55 points, it costs more than that. You're going to need one of those 2 upgrades, unless you're just doing something cheeky and doing bombing run or breakthrough and just having 3 of these things and flying them around. Sounds fun, but black and white's not going to cut it for that for me, at least. So once again, not cheap because of the upgrades, but we'll go ahead and look at those because I think this is the interesting part. The NAS Bombardier is 2 reds and 2 whites with that new overrun keyword requiring the model to literally fly over it. Immune to deflect. You can also do this twice, which is nice. Suppressive as well. I think it's actually a very solid upgrade and fits the idea of a bomber quite well. It's just, I see a lot of times people will do this, move once, move twice, go over stuff, bomb things, and then it just gets blasted off the table. It's also really hard because to do that, you're usually flying away from your army and sometimes your commanders to be able to give these things orders. And in the Gar faction, the last thing you want to give orders to is usually the supports. You usually want to give it to your clones so you can fire support as much as possible. And so that means that you're not going to have the order token on these Fluttercraft. And these Fluttercraft, in my opinion, are one of the most important units to be able to attack first, then last, or sorry, attack last then first, get out of range of stuff, keep it alive, do it again. But that's going to be really hard to do when you have other units that are in way more desperation to get those orders. So Bombardier kind of reinforces that idea in the fact that it has to literally go over units, so you're probably, or rather most certainly, will be in range of your opponent's majority of their army at the very least. Now the NAS Gunner, 2 red, 2 black at range 1 to 3, might be able to help fix that idea a little bit by keeping it a little farther back with the range 3 weapon. Biggest question here is it worth it? 15 points, that's a pretty good upgrade. For 70 points in total for the Fluttercraft, that's going to make it a very solid fire support platform because of the Impact 1 and Pierce 1, both keywords that the clones are begging for every time they shoot something, so that is a much welcome sight. The only problem here is the fixed rear. Thankfully, the unit has a reposition, but once again, that's really going to add to the idea that this thing is not easy to pilot. You're going to have to really learn how to maneuver the Fluttercraft in a way that you are getting that rear of the gun shooting at your opponent as much as possible, while also being able to do things like compulse, get out of range 3, or maybe make sure you're in range 3, whatever the situation is. It's going to be very hard to do, and once again, range 3 is a pretty sweet spot for most factions shooting right back at you. So I do like this upgrade. I think we might see a couple lists for sure that find some success with this, but right now I still think that this unit isn't all that great. Once again, the barks do exist, so I do think that also hurts the rating for me, for sure. Summary, Cheaper Fluttercraft is good. I think it's a beautiful model, and I know a lot of people would love to play Wookiees as well, so hopefully that adds to some more Wookiee lists being played. Secondly, barks are just really good. We all know that. They're just a super cheap unit that can play a lot of objectives really well, can be a good fire support platform, can just sometimes just do things like deal out suppression or be super annoying to take off the board because it's 5 red saves behind a single model. There's just a lot of things that can make barks really good on a game-to-game basis, no matter what objective or opponent you're playing. Barks, once again, kind of make the other two supports feel bad. Like, let's say we take Barks out of this report card and they just don't exist for whatever reason. I might bump up the grade of the other two a little bit, but I think Barks really do dominate this slot for the Republic, and for good reason. I don't think they're overpowered either. I think they're perfectly fine and a great addition to the Gar faction. It's the other two support options that may need a little bit of love, but maybe Fluttercraft don't. Similar theme, they all are fire support platforms. They all really want to aim shoot and then have a Z6 or whatever it is fire support into them to just chunk those massive dice pools that keep Gar in the competitive scene. Fluttercraft to me is the offensive version, ATRT is the defensive version. Something like the ATRT laser cannon can sit back at range 4 with 6 health and armor. Sure, the impact can still take those things out relatively quickly, but getting into range 4 and things like that could be a little bit difficult for some opponents. And more importantly, can really make your ATRTs a less favorable target. And then they also have those 3 red in melee. That doesn't sound that crazy, but trust me, when you have force users and things like that diving into your clones, it's very nice. So the ATRTs to me have always been a defensive unit that just kind of sits there, like the Twin Towers. I usually play with 2 of them, and they just pew pew the whole game. That's all they do. Fluttercraft is definitely, to me, the offensive version. Of course, Barks could be said the same way, but I see ATRTs and Fluttercrafts a little more similarly, because they're both white saves. Always go, go, go. Gonna fly over stuff, get into range 3 of things, speed her away, speed her in. Really fast offensive units to me, but extremely easy to kill in my opinion. Compared to the ATRT just having the flat out armor, gives it a lot of defense, even when you don't think it necessarily has any. Now, I will say this, I could be absolutely wrong about the Fluttercraft with the new points drop. I obviously have not seen a lot of people using it in the first place, so maybe we see some crazy lists with, like, especially Cody and things like that, but for the most part, nothing too crazy. Just some last remarks. Hope you guys are enjoying the video. Comment in this video what your favorite change was from this last errata and why. And is it going to make you play any specific units? I've been playing a ton of Rex. I know 5 points is by no means going to make Rex amazing again, but it does make him a little more enticing for me to bring and can fit a couple more upgrades in there. So, been loving that. In terms of the updates, I think that was a really good errata. I think that the game is back in a really good spot. Blizzard Force was around way too long, so I'm really happy to see them get toned down. I don't know if they got nerfed into oblivion, like Choke, for instance, but we do have a very good time in Legion. So if you guys are curious in terms of playing newer players, veteran players, maybe haven't been playing as much, I would say now's the time to play the game because nobody knows what the best lists are right now. There's a lot of good, good lists that you can play that I think are all going to be around the same competitive level, if that makes sense, due to the points changes. Dark Troopers, Blizzard Force dominating, Bounty Hunter, or Boba Fett for that matter, kind of dominating. All got toned down, so I think the Empire is going to chill a little bit, and that the other factions can kind of come out to play again. Also happy for the Mando players after we just ripped into them to actually see some changes to that. So I think super exciting time for Legion. But yeah, you guys let me know what your favorite update was. Like I said, once again, I will 100% finish up this report card video, immediately talk about the new units, and then I will talk about the errata and how it has changed report cards, and then we can start doing other stuff. Probably start talking about battle forces, and for those um, Pike players, Maul, the Shadow Collective, Blizzard Force, 501st, Invasion Force. We'll start talking about that kind of stuff too. But you guys let me know what kind of content you want to see after this and what you want to see up front and first, and I will get it out to you. See ya!